Um, Today's lesson is about measures of centre, so we're starting to look at statistics. Many of these you'll be familiar with, but there's some key concepts that you need deeper understanding of. So as a starter, in a normal class, I would give you a post-it note and ask you the question how your day's going and rate it from 1 to 10, with 1 being lousy and 10 being fantastic. Since we can't do that, I'm going to have to take a previous class's results so we can talk about those points. So the first thing to do is we need to set up a set of scales. You'll notice on the vertical scales here, we've got an F. Any ideas what the F stands for? That's right, it's frequency. So frequency just means the number of occurrence of a particular result, or the number of times a certain result comes up. Across the bottom, we've got our scale from 1 to 10, and this is, we'll say, is happiness. And also, with all good graphs, we need to make sure we've got a title. So, how is your day? So once we've got all those things, we have to go out and collect our result, and we then need to present it. So you can see after me going out giving you a post-it note, you'd put your number on there, then I would post them on the whiteboard. So each one of the crosses represents a post-it note. So that brings up some key questions. How are we going to measure how the class is feeling? So looking at the graph, how do we think the class is going? Now, the key thing I would say is if we're going to use a value, whose value best represents how the class is going? And I think most of us would answer the question by saying that center one is the best representation of how the class is going. So 7. And that's because we get around this idea that the middle represents the whole, or the whole group. So 7 is the number that best represents the middle of the group, that most people are scoring around about that. So you'd be able to say that most of the class is quite happy with their day. That doesn't change the fact that we are a little bit concerned about people down this end, about why their day isn't going as good as it should be as others. But it may also be that they misunderstood the scale, that they thought it went the other way. The lowest score was the happiest. Whatever. But generally, with most statistics, we get around this idea of looking at the middle. And that's why they're called the measures of central tendency, is that we can look at 3 statistics: the mean, the median, and the mode. Now, simply, the mean is what you would know traditionally as the average. So the mean represents all the data in the data set, or it finds the middle using all the data in the data set. And the reason why it does that is that you add up all the values and you divide by how many there are. So the sum of all the values, data values, and then you divide by the number of how many there are. So our example here is that we've got a mean set of numbers. We add them together and divide them by 10 because there are 10 different numbers. That gives us a mean average of 64, which, it's just dropped off the bottom there. It's 6.4 overall. So we know that that data set, the middle of that data set, is at 6.4. Another way to look at another measure of central tendency, or another way to measure the middle, is to look at the median. And the median is simply half the middle number in a data set. If there's an even number of numbers in the data set, then it's halfway, or between the 2 numbers in the middle. So to calculate the median, first thing you need to do is write your set of data from the lowest to the highest, and then cancel from the ends to find the middle number. So an example here is we've got 3 sets of data, and we're going to find the middle number of each one. So let's start off with A. First thing, put them in order. Next thing, you work from the ends to find the middle, and the median is 6. Another way to think about these data sets is you don't actually have to write them out and cancel to the middle. You could say, well, there's 5 numbers. If I go 5 divided by 2, that gives me 2.5 numbers to get the median. So that would mean that the third number is the middle. And the key thing with the median is if you have the median in the middle, we should have 2 equal groups either side. So you can see there's 2 numbers either side of the median. So if we look at this next data set, first thing, put it in order. This time we work from the ends, and this time rather than ending up on a solid number, we end up between 2 numbers. So the median is halfway between 4 and 5, which in this case is 4.5. You can see again, we end up with 2 groups of equal side, either side of the median. If there's 6 numbers in our data set, I divide by 2, then our groups must be equal to 3. So I end up with 2 groups of 3. So with C, same thing again, put them in order, work our way from the end, and you can see it's between 2 numbers, so the median is 7. If they're both 7s, it's going to have to be 7 for the median. So each of those numbers represents the middle of those data sets. All right, the mode. The mode tends to be the ugly stepbrother of the central tendencies. It is slightly different, that it's just the most common number. So examples, if I've got a set of data like this, which one is the most common one? It's 50 cents because there are 2 of them. There's 2 50s and everything else there is 1. In the second set of data, you can see that there's 2 modes. So there's 3 5s and there's also 3 9s. So you can have more than 1 mode. The last one, because there's no common numbers, we say that there's no mode. So you can have 1 mode, you can have more than 1 mode, or you can have no mode at all if they're all different. So the big question is, now that we've got these 3 measures of central tendency, what is the point? What is the reason why we have 3 different ones? And it's because they have different advantages and disadvantages depending on what context you're looking at. So the mean is useful because it includes all the data, and depending on your point of view, it might be that's a good reason to use it. And the same thing is for the median, or the opposite is true for the median, because it isn't influenced by higher or lower values, the outliers or extremely big numbers and things like that. Then it is it has the advantage that you can use it to have less of that influence. Lastly, the mode. The reason why you would use the mode out of the other 2 is that you only have the ability to use 1 number. A common reason to use a mode might be, t-shirt sizes or something like that, where you might only have the ability to make one of one size, and so you might as well use the most common. Because if you didn't use the most common one, you won't sell as many as you could do. The disadvantages of them is that the mean are in some ways the same thing as the advantages of them. The mean is affected by outliers, so if you are doing an average salary or something like that, and one particular person in the company earns a lot more than everybody else, then that average will be scaled up because of it. House prices are a classic example. There's one particular house in a town that is worth a lot more than all the others, then it can skew the actual average house price for the rest of the houses in the town. Or likewise the other way. If there's a particular house with a particularly low house price, that can skew it downwards as well. Whereas the median will tell you what the middle value is, no matter how high the highest number is and how low the lowest number is. The other thing about the median is it can be hard to calculate, especially for a large data set. Obviously, the disadvantages of the mode is that in some ways it may not represent the middle, because you may have a situation that the most popular number is a particularly high number, and then therefore it ignores, or a particularly low number, and then that excludes all the other values. So what I'd like you to do is have a go at calculating the mean and the median of these 6 data sets, and see how you go. So in a moment you can pause the video and then play it again, and we'll go through the answers. Okay, hopefully you had a go at finding the mean and the median, and let's take a look at the results. If you looked at your results, you may have noticed a pattern, and the pattern being, with the first one we can find the middle number, we can add them all together, and we get 51, and that can give us our answer. But for all of the rest of them, the median is 3, which makes sense that 3 is the middle number, but also that the mean is 3. So that brings us a bit of a problem, that we've got 6 data sets, and statistically using the central tendency or the average, they all look statistically the same. So that's going to lead on to our next lesson, that we're going to need another statistic that looks at data sets. So you can't distinguish data sets simply by the measure of central tendency, because you'll see that all 5 of those data sets are very different when you look at the numbers, but statistically they look exactly the same. So we need another statistic to be able to distinguish between them. Okay, that's the end of this lesson, so you need to go to the OneNote lesson page and then carry on with some work from the workbook.